Before we dive in, it's crucial to state that this video is for informational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have seen in this presentation. There's a question that millions of Americans are terrified to answer honestly. It's not about their finances, their politics, or their secret browsing history. It's 4 simple words. How are you doing? Because for so many of us, the real answer is exhausting. We're smiling in the Zoom meeting while our stomach is in knots. We're posting vacation photos while a fog of anxiety follows us everywhere. We feel like we're running a marathon in quicksand, and the worst part? We feel like we're the only one. If that sounds even remotely familiar, then this is the most important video you will watch this year. We're going to talk about the most misunderstood, misdiagnosed, and stigmatized health crisis in America today. We're talking about mental health, and by the end of this journey together, you are going to have a completely new framework for understanding it. This isn't going to be a lecture full of clinical jargon you can't use. This is a roadmap. We are going to dismantle the stigma, decode the confusion, and give you the practical tools to not only build your own mental resilience, but to become the person who can support the people you care about most. This isn't just about awareness, it's about action. Think about it this way. If you broke your arm, you'd know exactly what to do. You'd go to the emergency room, get a cast, and let it heal. Everyone would understand. They'd sign your cast, help you carry your groceries, and ask how you're feeling. There's no shame, no silence. It's a clear, accepted process. Your body has a problem and you get it fixed. But what happens when the injury is invisible? What happens when the pain is behind your eyes? When the exhaustion isn't in your muscles but in your soul? For decades, the default answer in our society has been to just power through it, to toughen up, to pretend it isn't happening. We treat the check engine light in our car with more urgency than the check engine light in our own brain. And this silence, this collective agreement to look the other way, has created a silent epidemic. This matters more today than ever before. We're living in an era of unprecedented pressure. We're bombarded by curated perfection on social media, creating a gap between our real lives and the highlight reels we see online. We're navigating economic uncertainty, political division, and a hustle culture that tells us that if we're not grinding 24/7, we're falling behind. We are more connected digitally, yet studies show we are lonelier than ever. Our brains and our nervous systems were not designed for this constant, low-grade state of alarm, and they are starting to show the strain. The conversation needs to change, and it starts with a simple, powerful idea. Mental health is health. Full stop. It's not a separate category, it's not a weakness, it's not a character flaw. It is a fundamental component of your overall well-being, just like your cardiovascular health or your immune system. No Super Bowl winning quarterback would ever ignore a torn ACL and say, "I'll just walk it off." They'd get the best medical care possible, because their physical health is critical to their performance. So why do we expect top performers in business, in our families, in our lives to just power through crippling anxiety or debilitating depression? This is what mental health awareness is truly about. It's not just knowing that conditions like depression exist. It's a 3-legged stool. First, it's recognition. It's the ability to see the signs, both in yourself and in others. It's learning to spot the difference between a bad day and a bad month. It's understanding that persistent irritability, a loss of interest in things you used to love, or a constant feeling of dread aren't just moods, they can be symptoms. Second, it's understanding. This is the game changer. It's the deep core belief that mental health conditions are real, biological, and medical issues. They are not the result of a person being lazy, weak, or ungrateful. You wouldn't tell someone with diabetes to just produce more insulin. So why do we tell someone with depression to just be happier? Understanding means replacing judgment with compassion and replacing myths with facts. And third, it's action. Awareness is useless if it doesn't lead to action. This means knowing what to do. It means knowing how to have a conversation with someone who is struggling. It means knowing where to find resources, from therapy to support groups to crisis hotlines. And it means creating a culture where asking for help is seen not as a sign of weakness, but as a profound act of strength. Let me tell you a story that shows why this matters. Think of a guy named Alex. On the surface, Alex is crushing it. Good job, nice apartment, great group of friends. He's the guy everyone relies on. But internally, Alex is drowning. He wakes up every morning with a feeling of heavy, nameless dread. The work he used to be passionate about now feels like a monumental chore. He forces a smile at social events, but feels completely disconnected, like he's watching his own life from behind a pane of glass. He's exhausted, but he can't sleep. He's surrounded by people, but he's never felt more alone. His friends and family notice he's a bit withdrawn. They say things with the best of intentions like, "Hey, you just need a vacation." Or, "Come on, cheer up, you have so much to be grateful for." They see his behavior, but they don't recognize the symptoms. Their lack of awareness, though well-meaning, just makes Alex feel more isolated, more broken. It reinforces the voice in his head telling him he's a failure for feeling this way. Then one day, a friend named Maria pulls him aside. She's been paying attention. She's noticed the subtle changes, how Alex has stopped joining the weekly basketball game, how his laughter doesn't quite reach his eyes anymore. But instead of offering generic advice, she says something different. She says, "Hey, I've noticed you haven't seemed like yourself lately. I don't know what's going on, but I want you to know that I'm here for you if you ever want to talk. No judgment. And just so you know, it's completely okay to not be okay." That's it. That one sentence. It's not a cure, it's not a solution. But it's a key. It's a key that unlocks a door Alex thought was permanently welded shut. For the first time, he doesn't feel judged. He feels seen. That conversation gives Alex the courage to make a phone call he'd been putting off for months. He finds a therapist. He gets a diagnosis. It's the beginning of a long journey with good days and bad days, but it is for the first time a journey forward. Not because of a miracle drug or a magic fix, but because one person's awareness created a safe space for him to take the first step. That is the power we are here to unlock. The power to be a Maria for the Alex in your life. Or just as importantly, to be a Maria for yourself. To give yourself the same grace, the same permission to seek help, the same understanding that this is not a personal failing. It is a human condition. So, how do we build this awareness on a massive scale? How do we make conversations like the one Maria had the norm, not the exception? We have to start by attacking the root of the problem. The single biggest barrier to mental wellness in this country isn't a lack of treatments or a lack of experts. It's a four-letter word: fear. Fear of judgment, fear of looking weak, fear of what other people will think. This fear is the foundation of stigma. And to tear down this wall that has kept millions suffering in silence, we first have to understand how it was built. We need to look at the history, the cultural forces, and the deep-seated misunderstandings that turned a health issue into a source of shame. Because the conversation about mental health isn't just about saving lives. It's about unlocking them. And it all starts by dragging the invisible enemy that has kept us silent for generations out into the light. Let's expose it. This enemy has a name: stigma. It's a simple word for a deeply complicated and ancient force. It's the invisible wall that separates us from them. It's the quiet judgment in a friend's eyes, the hushed whispers at the office, the fear-laced advice from a well-meaning relative to just snap out of it. But where did this wall come from? It wasn't built overnight. Its foundations were laid thousands of years ago, in the bedrock of fear and misunderstanding. To truly understand the battle we're fighting today, we have to walk back through time, into a world lit by fire and superstition. Imagine a world where a storm in your mind wasn't seen as an illness, but as a curse. A world where depression wasn't a chemical imbalance, but a demonic possession. The first treatments for mental illness weren't therapy or medication. They were exorcisms, prayers, and even trepanation. The horrifying practice of drilling a hole into a person's skull to release the evil spirits trapped inside. The root of stigma is right there. The belief that what is happening inside your head is not a part of your humanity, but an invasion by something inhuman. It was a spiritual failing, a moral stain. As civilizations rose and fell, this fear didn't disappear. It just changed its clothes. Fast forward to the Middle Ages and the Renaissance. We built institutions. We called them asylums. The word itself sounds clinical, but the reality was anything but. The most infamous of these was London's Bethlem Royal Hospital, a name that the public soon corrupted into Bedlam. And Bedlam it was. People weren't treated as patients. They were treated as animals. They were chained to walls, left in their own filth, and subjected to treatments that were pure torture: beatings, starvation, and submersion in ice-cold water. But here's the truly chilling part. The part that cemented stigma into our cultural DNA. Bedlam became a tourist attraction. For a penny, London's elite could stroll through the asylum's halls and gawk at the inmates, laughing at their delusions, recoiling in performative horror at their cries. Mental illness became a spectacle, a form of entertainment. This wasn't just neglect, it was dehumanization on a grand scale. It sent a terrifying message that echoed through the centuries. If your mind breaks, you lose more than your reason. You lose your personhood. You become a monster in a cage, an object of fear and morbid curiosity. Is it any wonder we learn to hide our struggles? Is it any wonder the first instinct for generations was to suffer in silence rather than risk being put on display? The Age of Enlightenment was supposed to bring reason and science, and in some ways it did. The 18th and 19th centuries saw a push for more humane treatment, the so-called moral therapy. But the underlying fear remained. We simply traded the chains of the asylum for the labels of the new medical establishment. Words like lunatic, insane, and hysteric became clinical diagnoses. And with these diagnoses came a new, more insidious form of stigma. It was no longer about evil spirits, but about bad blood, hereditary defects, and a fundamental brokenness in a person's character and lineage. You weren't possessed, you were defective. And then came the 20th century, an era of breathtaking scientific progress and simultaneously breathtaking cruelty. We invented new, supposedly scientific treatments. The ice pick lobotomy, a procedure that won its creator a Nobel Prize, severed connections in the brain's prefrontal cortex, often leaving patients in a passive, childlike state. It was sold as a miracle cure, but it was really a way to make difficult people more manageable, to erase the parts of their personality that society found inconvenient. We harnessed electricity for electroconvulsive therapy, which in its early unregulated form, was a brutal procedure that could break bones and erase memories. These weren't treatments designed to heal a person. They were designed to control a problem. The message was clear. Your inner world is a threat, and we will physically invade your brain to subdue it. So for thousands of years, the story of mental illness was a story of fear, shame, and brutality. It was something to be hidden, locked away, or violently extinguished. But then something began to shift. The world was plunged into 2 global wars, and millions of young men were sent into the meat grinder of the trenches and the chaos of the battlefield. They came home, but many of them didn't come home whole. They carried invisible wounds. They had what was then called shell shock or combat fatigue. Today we call it post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. This was a turning point, because these weren't strangers in a faraway asylum. These were our sons, our brothers, our fathers, our husbands. They were celebrated as heroes. And yet, they were suffering from the same kinds of symptoms: anxiety, depression, nightmares, emotional numbness, that had seen others locked away and labeled as defective. Society couldn't easily dismiss the mental anguish of its own heroes. For the first time on a massive scale, the conversation was forced into the open. It became clear that the mind, just like the body, could be wounded by trauma. It wasn't a moral failing or a demonic possession. It was an injury, a consequence. At the same time, the fields of psychology and psychiatry were gaining legitimacy. Thinkers like Freud and Jung, for all their controversial ideas, had done something revolutionary. They made the inner life, the subconscious mind, a subject of serious intellectual inquiry. And in the 1950s, a true revolution began: the development of the first effective psychotropic medications. Drugs like Thorazine and later the first antidepressants offered tangible proof that mental illness had a biological component, that it could be treated by targeting the chemistry of the brain. This was a seismic shift. It was the beginning of the slow, painful process of moving mental illness out of the realm of morality and into the realm of medicine. This led to deinstitutionalization, the movement to close down the massive, horrifying asylums and integrate people back into the community. It was a noble idea, born from a desire for more humane treatment, but it was imperfectly executed, and many vulnerable people were left without adequate support. Yet, the core principle was transformative. The walls of Bedlam were, symbolically at least, beginning to crumble. But here's the crucial thing to understand. Even with all this progress, the ghosts of the past still linger. The echoes of the asylum, the shadow of the lobotomy, the stain of demonic possession, they are all still with us. They live on in the language we use. Think about it. When we want to dismiss an idea, we call it crazy. When someone is acting erratically, we say they're insane or have gone mental. We use psycho and nuts as casual insults. These aren't just words. They are weapons. They are the modern-day remnants of a history that defined mental struggle as something less than human. They are the bricks in that invisible wall of stigma. This history is why we're scared. It's why we instinctively lower our voices when talking about therapy. It's why a parent might feel a pang of shame, not just worry, when their child is diagnosed with anxiety. We are carrying the weight of centuries of fear. The stigma we feel today wasn't invented by our generation. It is a cultural inheritance, a deeply ingrained social reflex passed down from a time when the human mind was a dark and terrifying mystery. Understanding this history is not about assigning blame. It's about empowerment. It shows us that this stigma is not a fundamental truth about the world. It is a man-made construct, built brick by painful brick over generations. And if it was built by us, it can be dismantled by us. We've come so far, from drilling holes in skulls to understanding neurochemistry. We have proven that we can evolve. But the next stage of that evolution isn't just about discovering new medicines or therapies. It's about consciously excavating these old, toxic beliefs and replacing them with something better. It's about confronting the ghosts. Because only by understanding how this wall of stigma was built can we begin to figure out how exactly we're going to tear it down in our own lives right now. So let's start with the first swing of the hammer. The first step in tearing down any wall is to understand what it's made of. And this wall, the one that keeps us isolated and in pain, is built from three distinct, yet interconnected types of bricks. The first, and perhaps the heaviest, is the brick of self-stigma. This is the internal monologue. The voice in your head that whispers you're not trying hard enough, that you're weak, that you're broken beyond repair. It's the ghost we just talked about, the one that's taken up residence in your own mind. It's the shame that stops you from even admitting to yourself that you're struggling. This voice is a master manipulator. It takes a real, legitimate neurochemical imbalance or a past trauma and repackages it as a personal failing. It tells you that anxiety isn't a condition. It's a character flaw. It tells you depression isn't an illness. It's just you being lazy or overly dramatic. Self-stigma is what happens when the poison of the outside world seeps in and you start to believe it. You become your own worst critic, your own harshest judge. You start to see your mental health challenge not as a part of your health, like a broken arm or diabetes, but as the defining negative truth of who you are. And the tool to dismantle this brick, the first swing of the hammer, is something that sounds simple but is profoundly difficult: radical self-awareness. This isn't about positive affirmations or just thinking happy thoughts. That's like trying to fix a gaping wound with a Band-Aid. Radical self-awareness is about becoming a neutral observer of your own mind. It's about learning to separate yourself from your thoughts. Imagine your mind is a busy highway. The cars are your thoughts. Some are fast and aggressive, some are slow and sad, some are just neutral passing by. For years, you've been standing in the middle of this highway, getting hit by every single car, believing you are the traffic. Radical self-awareness is the act of taking a step back and moving to the side of the road. You can still see the cars. You can observe them. Ah, there's a "you're not good enough" car. Interesting. There's a "what if everything goes wrong" truck. You see them, you acknowledge them, but you don't let them run you over. You realize you are not the traffic. You are the one watching the traffic. This practice, rooted in concepts like mindfulness and cognitive behavioral therapy, allows you to create a sliver of space between a feeling and your reaction to it. In that space, you can ask a question. Is this thought actually true? Or is it just a story my brain is telling me based on old programming? By consistently and compassionately questioning that inner critic, you rob it of its power. You begin to see it for what it is: a faulty alarm system, not a prophet. You stop fighting the ghost and start studying it. And in doing so, you take the first, most crucial brick out of that wall. But even when you start to dismantle your own internal stigma, you're still faced with the second brick: social stigma. This is the fear of the outside world. The fear of what your friends, your family, your boss will think if they knew. This is the brick made of judgment, misunderstanding, and stereotypes. It's the reason we say, "I'm feeling a little under the weather," instead of "my depression is so heavy today, I can barely get out of bed." It's the reason people get fired for having a panic attack at work, but get a sympathy card for breaking a leg. Social stigma is built on a foundation of ignorance. It thrives in silence. It's the collective cultural belief that mental health is something to be hidden, something shameful. We see it in movies where the crazy person is a villain. We hear it in casual language when people say things like "that's so psycho," or "I'm so OCD about my desk." Each one of those phrases is another layer of mortar, reinforcing the idea that these conditions are not serious medical issues, but quirky or dangerous personality traits. This fear of judgment forces us into isolation. We believe that if we show our authentic struggling selves, we will be rejected. We will lose respect, opportunities, and relationships. So we wear a mask. We pretend everything is okay. And that mask is incredibly heavy. The tool for breaking this brick is vulnerability. But it has to be strategic vulnerability. This isn't about standing on a street corner with a megaphone and announcing your deepest fears to the world. It's about choosing your circle. It's about finding one person, a trusted friend, a partner, a therapist, and testing the waters. It's the terrifying, courageous act of saying, "I'm not okay and I need help." What happens when you do this is nothing short of magic. More often than not, when you share your struggle with someone who is safe, you don't get judgment. You get a mirror. You get, "Me too." Or, "I haven't felt that exactly, but my brother did." Or simply, "Wow, thank you for trusting me. How can I help?" Every single one of these conversations is a chisel chipping away at the wall of social stigma. You realize you are not alone. And by sharing your story, you give someone else permission to share theirs. It creates a ripple effect. You're not just helping yourself. You're changing the culture of your own small community. You're proving that connection, not judgment, is the antidote to shame. You're replacing a brick of fear with a window of empathy, one conversation at a time. Now, even if you've dismantled your self-stigma and started to break down social stigma in your circle, you're still left with the third and most formidable brick, systemic or institutional stigma. This is the big one. This isn't about individual thoughts or conversations. This is about the systems we live in. It's the insurance company that makes you jump through a dozen hoops to get therapy covered, but approves a major surgery in a day. It's the workplace culture that preaches work-life balance, but implicitly punishes anyone who uses a mental health day. It's the lack of mental health education in schools, the criminalization of addiction, the underfunding of community health centers. Systemic stigma is the wall itself, baked into our laws, our policies, and our economic structures. It's the reason why, even if you've overcome your own shame and the fear of your friend's judgment, you might still not be able to get the care you need. You might not be able to afford it. The nearest therapist might be a 2-hour drive away. Your job might not provide the flexibility you need to attend appointments. This brick can feel impossible to break. As an individual, how can you possibly take on a multi-billion-dollar insurance industry or decades of flawed public policy? It feels overwhelming, and that feeling can lead to hopelessness. But the tool here is not a hammer. It's a lever. And that lever is informed advocacy. Start small. It starts with knowing your rights. Did you know that the Americans with Disabilities Act can protect employees with diagnosed mental health conditions? Did you know there are laws like the Mental Health Parity and Addiction Equity Act that require most insurance plans to cover mental health care the same way they cover physical health care? Most people don't. Informed advocacy begins with educating yourself. It's learning the language of insurance claims and workplace accommodations. It's knowing what to ask for and how to ask for it. Then it expands. It's about using your voice. It's writing to your elected officials. It's supporting organizations that fight for better mental health legislation. It's about choosing to work for companies that have a proven, tangible commitment to employee mental wellness. You don't have to be a lobbyist on Capitol Hill. You can be an advocate in your own HR department. You can be an advocate in a school board meeting. You can be an advocate by simply voting for policies and people who prioritize mental health care. This is the long game. Dismantling self-stigma can happen in a moment of clarity. Chipping away at social stigma can happen in a single conversation. But breaking down systemic stigma is a generational project. It requires persistence. It requires us to transform our personal pain into a collective purpose. It's the understanding that my well-being is intrinsically linked to your well-being, and that a system that fails one of us ultimately fails all of us. Each brick we remove, from the inside out, from the personal to the public, weakens the entire structure, letting in a little more light. And to understand just how much light we need, we have to be willing to look into the shadows of our own history. Because the stigma, the fear, and the misunderstandings we fight against today weren't born in a vacuum. They are ghosts. They are the echoes of a past where mental illness was not seen as a health condition, but as a moral failing, a demonic possession, or a stain on the family name. For centuries, the response to this madness was not treatment, but containment. Imagine a place, not a hospital but a warehouse for human beings. A place called the Bethlehem Royal Hospital in London, known to the world infamously as Bedlam. For a small fee, the wealthy public could come and tour the asylum, peering into the cells to gawk at the patients as a form of entertainment. The inmates, often chained to walls, living in their own filth, were a spectacle. Their suffering was a Sunday afternoon diversion. This wasn't just a British phenomenon. It was the blueprint. Across the world and here in the United States, asylums were built on a similar premise: to remove the mentally ill from society, to hide them away, not to heal them. The very architecture of these places, the barred windows, the high walls, the labyrinthine corridors, was designed for imprisonment, not recovery. Inside these walls, the treatments were based on theories that now seem like something out of a horror film. Bloodletting to release supposed bad humors. Spinning chairs, meant to jolt the brain back into alignment by inducing extreme vertigo. Purging, blistering, and ice-cold water submersions. These weren't acts of healing. They were acts of punishment designed to break the will, to shock the system into submission. The core belief was that the mind was broken, and like a stubborn animal, it needed to be tamed. There was no concept of therapy, no understanding of brain chemistry, only a profound and terrifying ignorance. This brutal reality was largely hidden from the public eye. People knew these asylums existed, but the true horrors within were a matter of rumor and whispered fears. That is, until a young, fiercely determined journalist decided to see it for herself. In 1887, a 23-year-old reporter named Elizabeth Cochrane, writing under the pen name Nellie Bly, feigned insanity to get herself committed to the Women's Lunatic Asylum on Blackwell's Island in New York City. Her goal was to expose the conditions from the inside. What she found was worse than anyone imagined. For 10 days, Bly lived as a patient. She documented everything. The food was inedible: spoiled meat, stale bread, and greasy, undrinkable tea. The water was filthy. The nurses were cruel and abusive, choking, beating, and tormenting the patients with impunity. But perhaps the most horrifying discovery was the cold. The women were forced into ice-cold baths, water dumped over their heads again and again, leaving them shivering and blue. They were dressed in thin cotton dresses with no coats in the freezing cold. Bly wrote about the profound sense of hopelessness that permeated the asylum, a place where once you entered, you were stripped of your identity, your credibility, and your humanity. Her most chilling observation? Many of the women in the asylum weren't insane at all. They were immigrants who couldn't speak English, women who had defied their husbands, or simply those who had been inconvenient to their families. Once labeled insane, there was almost no way out. No one would listen to them. When Bly was released, thanks to her newspaper's intervention, her exposé, 10 Days in a Madhouse, was a sensation. It shocked the nation. The public outcry led to a grand jury investigation and sweeping reforms in New York's asylums. Nellie Bly showed the world that awareness, bringing the darkness into the light, was the first, most powerful step toward change. She was one of the first mental health advocates, using her voice to speak for those who had been silenced. But even as the age of the brutal asylum began to wane, it was replaced by a new era, one that was perhaps even more sinister because it was cloaked in the language of modern science. The mid-20th century saw the rise of a new miracle cure: the lobotomy. The theory, developed by Portuguese neurologist Agos Muniz, was that by severing the connections in the brain's prefrontal cortex, you could calm severe psychiatric disorders. In the United States, this procedure was championed and popularized by a doctor named Walter Freeman. He developed the ice pick lobotomy, a horrifyingly crude procedure where a long, thin instrument was inserted through the eye socket with a mallet and wiggled around to destroy brain tissue. Freeman was a showman. He traveled the country in a van he called his lobotomobile, performing thousands of these procedures, often in non-sterile environments, sometimes performing dozens in a single day. For a time, he was hailed as a pioneer. Families, desperate for any solution to their loved one's suffering, saw him as a savior. The most famous case was that of Rosemary Kennedy, the sister of President John F. Kennedy. Her father arranged a lobotomy for her at age 23 to cure her mood swings and rebelliousness. The procedure left her permanently incapacitated, with the mental capacity of a toddler, unable to walk or speak intelligibly for the rest of her life. The lobotomy was a medical catastrophe, a stark reminder that without a true understanding of the brain, our attempts to fix it can be monstrously destructive. It wasn't a cure. It was a way to make patients more docile, more manageable. It silenced the problem. It didn't solve it. The public revulsion to the lobotomy, combined with the development of the first antipsychotic medications in the 1950s, led to the next major shift in mental health care: deinstitutionalization. The idea was noble. President John F. Kennedy himself, haunted by his sister's fate, signed the Community Mental Health Act in 1963. The goal was to close the massive, overcrowded, and inhumane state hospitals and replace them with a network of community-based mental health centers. People would receive care while living in their own communities, integrated into society rather than isolated from it. It was a beautiful idea, and it was a colossal failure. The hospitals closed, releasing hundreds of thousands of patients, many with severe and persistent mental illnesses. But the second part of the plan, the funding and construction of the community centers, never fully materialized. State and federal governments slashed funding. The comprehensive support network that was promised became a patchwork of underfunded, understaffed clinics. For countless individuals, the promise of community care became the reality of abandonment. They were released from the asylum onto the street. This single policy failure is a direct cause of many of the social crises we face today. A massive percentage of the homeless population in the United States suffers from a severe mental illness. Our jails and prisons have become the new asylums. The Los Angeles County Jail, Rikers Island in New York, the Cook County Jail in Chicago. These are now the 3 largest mental health facilities in the country. We traded one set of walls for another, exchanging the hospital gown for the prison jumpsuit. We criminalized mental illness. This history is not just a collection of sad stories from the past. It is the soil in which our current attitudes are rooted. The fear of being locked up or put away is a rational fear born from the reality of the asylum. The suspicion that psychiatric treatment is a tool for social control is a direct legacy of the lobotomy. The belief that people with mental illness are dangerous or helpless is an echo from an era that treated them as such. And the sight of a person struggling with psychosis on a city street is the direct, visible consequence of our broken promise of community care. We cannot understand why mental health awareness matters today without understanding this journey through the dark. We have to see the ghosts of Bedlam, feel the outrage of Nellie Bly, and witness the tragedy of the lobotomobile. We have to recognize that our modern system, for all its advances, is built upon the rubble of these past failures. The stigma we fight is not some abstract prejudice. It is a deep historical wound. And knowing this history is not about assigning blame. It's about understanding the stakes. It's about recognizing how far we've come, but more importantly, how far we still have to go to finally get it right. Because the move from chaining people to walls to abandoning them on the streets is not progress. It's just a different kind of failure. The question now is, what does real progress actually look like? Real progress, it turns out, isn't about building a better building. It's about building a better map of the human mind itself. For centuries, our understanding of mental illness was like a medieval map of the world. Vast oceans labeled, "Here be dragons." We knew something was out there, something terrifying and powerful, but we had no idea what it was shaped by, or how to navigate it. The asylum was an attempt to sail to the edge of the map and throw the dragons overboard. Deinstitutionalization was the equivalent of burning the ships and telling the sailors to swim home. Neither approach tried to understand what the dragons actually were. To find the answer, we have to go back to the 1950s, a time of immense optimism. We had new wonder drugs for everything from infections to allergies, and soon we had them for the mind. The first antipsychotics and antidepressants hit the market, and they seemed like miracles. For the first time, it felt like we could chemically reach into the brain and fix what was broken. This gave rise to a powerful and seductively simple idea: the chemical imbalance theory. The theory proposed that mental illnesses like depression or anxiety were caused by a straightforward lack of certain chemicals in the brain, like serotonin or dopamine. Your brain was like a car engine low on oil. The solution? Just add more oil. A pill could top you up and get you running smoothly again. This idea was a revolution. It moved mental illness out of the realm of moral failing or spiritual possession and placed it firmly in the world of medicine. It was a biological problem just like diabetes or heart disease, and that was a monumental step forward in reducing stigma. It told people, this isn't your fault. It's just your chemistry. For millions, medication was and still is a life-saving tool that pulls them back from the brink. It gave people functional lives they never thought possible. But this simple story, the story of the broken brain, had a dark side. It was incomplete. And in its incompleteness, it was profoundly misleading. It suggested that human suffering, our thoughts, our feelings, our histories, was irrelevant. All that mattered was the level of serotonin between our synapses. The person was erased, replaced by a simple biological machine in need of a tune-up. We had traded the chains of the asylum for a new kind of prison, the prison of our own biology. We were told we were victims of our brain chemistry, with little to no agency in our own recovery. But while the world was embracing this simple chemical story, a young psychiatrist in Philadelphia was starting to notice that the map didn't match the territory. His name was Aaron T. Beck. Beck was a fully trained and practicing psychoanalyst, a discipline that had its own map of the mind. In psychoanalysis, depression wasn't a chemical problem. It was a psychological one. Specifically, it was believed to be anger, turned inward against the self. Beck accepted this as fact. It was the gospel according to Freud. But as a scientist, he wanted to prove it. He began studying the dreams of his depressed patients, expecting to find themes of hostility and anger. But he didn't. Over and over again, he found the opposite. His patients' dreams were filled with themes of defectiveness, deprivation, and loss. They dreamed they were incompetent, unlovable, and destined to fail. This was a puzzle. The theory said they should be angry, but the data, their own subconscious thoughts, said they were just incredibly, profoundly negative about themselves and their world. So Beck started listening more closely, not just to their dreams, but to their waking thoughts. He asked a patient, who was feeling anxious during a session, what was going through her mind. She admitted she was worried she was boring him, that she was wasting his time, that she was probably the most boring patient he had all day. Beck realized in a flash of insight that he was witnessing a second conversation happening just beneath the surface, a constant stream of quiet, automatic, and intensely negative self-judgment. He called them automatic negative thoughts. This was the dragon. It wasn't some deep repressed anger from childhood. It was right there on the surface, running on a loop all day long. Thoughts like, I'll never be good enough. Everyone thinks I'm a failure. Nothing will ever work out for me. Beck realized that his patients weren't depressed because of some abstract, inward-facing anger. They were depressed because they genuinely believed these thoughts were true. They weren't suffering from a mood disorder as much as a thinking disorder. Their thinking was systematically distorted, like looking at the world through a warped and filthy lens. This discovery was an earthquake that shattered the foundations of both psychoanalysis and the simple chemical imbalance theory. It suggested something radical. What if you could treat depression not by digging into the past for years, and not just by altering brain chemistry, but by teaching people to change the way they think right here, right now? This was the birth of cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. The idea was to give patients the tools to become scientists of their own thoughts. To catch those automatic negative thoughts, write them down, and examine them like a piece of evidence in a courtroom. Is this thought actually true? What's the evidence for it? What's the evidence against it? Are there other, more realistic ways of looking at this situation? It was revolutionary because it was collaborative, it was practical, and most importantly, it was empowering. It handed the keys back to the patient. It said, you are not a broken machine. You are not a passive victim of your brain. You are an active participant in your own mental life, and you have the power to change it. This didn't mean medication was useless. It meant it was only one piece of a much larger, more complex puzzle. And this brings us to the modern map, the one we use today to truly understand what mental health is. It's called the biopsychosocial model. It sounds complicated, but it's actually an incredibly intuitive and holistic way of looking at ourselves. The bio part acknowledges the biological factors. Our genetics, our brain structure, our hormones, and yes, our brain chemistry. This is where medication and other medical interventions can be incredibly helpful. It affirms that our mental life has a physical foundation. The psycho part is the world Aaron Beck opened up. It's our psychology, our thoughts, our beliefs, our emotions, and our behaviors. It's our personality, our self-esteem, our trauma history, and the coping skills we've learned or failed to learn along the way. This is the realm of therapy, of learning new ways to think and act. But it's the third piece, the social piece, that truly completes the map and shows us why the old approaches were doomed to fail. This encompasses our entire world outside of our own skin. Our family, our friends, our community, our socioeconomic status, our access to education and healthcare, our job security, the culture we live in, the stigmas we face, the support systems we have or don't have. You cannot separate a person's mental health from their environment. You can't medicate away poverty. You can't use therapy to fix a toxic work environment or systemic discrimination. You can't teach someone positive self-talk if they go home to an abusive relationship every night. This biopsychosocial model is the real progress. It's the understanding that mental health is not one thing. It's an intricate, dynamic dance between our brains, our minds, and our world. It explains why two people with the exact same genetic predisposition for depression might have wildly different outcomes. One with a supportive family, a stable job, and access to therapy might thrive. The other, facing isolation, unemployment, and systemic barriers, might spiral into a severe crisis. It's not a failure of their biology or their willpower. It's a failure of their environment to support their well-being. And this is why awareness is so much more than just being aware that depression exists. It's about understanding this complexity. It's about recognizing that when we talk about mental health, we're also talking about social justice, economic policy, and community building. It's about seeing the whole person in their whole environment. This new map is infinitely more accurate, more compassionate, and more effective. But it also reveals a terrifying truth. Fixing a chemical imbalance with a pill is simple. Fixing a person's entire world, that is a profoundly more difficult challenge. We now had a map that showed us the dragons, the treacherous currents, and the distant shores. The problem was, the system we had built to navigate this world was still using the old flat map. It was designed to prescribe pills and offer therapy sessions, but it was utterly unprepared to deal with the social reality that was breaking people in the first place. So what was this new social reality? What was this terra incognita that our old maps couldn't chart? It wasn't one single thing, but a convergence of powerful forces that began to fundamentally reshape the ground beneath our feet. For generations, the dominant story in America was one of predictable progress. You work hard, you get an education, you buy a house, you build a life. It was a promise, a psychological safety net. But for millions, that promise began to fray, and then it simply broke. The first force was a profound and creeping economic precarity. This isn't just about a recession or a bad quarter on Wall Street. This was a systemic shift. The stable, lifelong career with a pension became a relic of a bygone era, replaced by the gig economy, contract work, and the constant, gnawing anxiety of instability. Student loan debt ballooned into a national crisis, saddling entire generations with a mortgage-sized burden before they even earned their first real paycheck. The cost of housing, of healthcare, of simply existing, began to outpace wages at a terrifying rate. Suddenly, the basic building blocks of a stable adult life, a home, a family, a retirement, felt less like achievable goals and more like luxury goods. This created a persistent, low-grade hum of anxiety that became the background noise of modern life. It's the stress of knowing that a single medical emergency or a surprise car repair could send your entire financial house of cards tumbling down. This isn't the kind of anxiety you can meditate away. It's not an irrational fear. It's a deeply rational response to an increasingly irrational and insecure economic system. Trying to treat this with therapy alone is like teaching someone deep breathing exercises while they're actively treading water in a stormy sea. It might help for a moment, but it does absolutely nothing to address the storm or the lack of a lifeboat. The second force arrived on a glowing screen, fitting perfectly in the palm of our hands. Social media wasn't just a new technology. It was a new reality, a digital layer superimposed over our physical world. And it fundamentally rewired our social brains. Initially, it promised connection, a global village. But it delivered something far more complicated. It created a culture of perpetual performance. Our messy, complicated human lives were flattened into curated highlight reels. We weren't just living anymore. We were broadcasting, constantly crafting a personal brand, performing a version of happiness and success for an invisible audience. This gave birth to a new, insidious form of comparison. It wasn't just keeping up with the Joneses next door. It was keeping up with thousands of Joneses, all of whom seemed to be living more beautiful, more successful, more meaningful lives. The algorithms, designed for engagement above all else, learned that outrage and fear were the most potent drivers of attention. They began to funnel us into echo chambers, amplifying our anxieties and confirming our worst biases, tearing at the fabric of a shared reality. And perhaps most paradoxically, in this age of hyperconnection, we became lonelier than ever. We had hundreds of friends but no one to call in a crisis. We were surrounded by digital noise, but starved for genuine, vulnerable human connection. The platforms designed to bring us together were, in many ways, atomizing us, leaving us isolated in a crowded digital room. This leads directly to the third, and perhaps most tragic force, the quiet collapse of community. For centuries, human well-being was anchored in real-world, face-to-face community. It was the church, the union hall, the bowling league, the neighborhood barbecue, the local VFW post. These were what sociologists call third places, spaces outside of home and work where people gathered, formed bonds, and built social capital. They were the connective tissue of a healthy society. But as economic pressures mounted, forcing us to work longer hours and multiple jobs, and as digital life pulled us further indoors, these third places began to wither and die. The bowling alleys closed. The community centers lost funding. The front porch, once a hub of neighborhood life, became a place to receive Amazon packages. We began to live in suburbs designed for cars, not people, where you could go for weeks without speaking to a neighbor. We traded deep, rooted community for shallow transient networks. This erosion of community created a profound void. We are a social species, hardwired for belonging. When that need isn't met, the psychological consequences are devastating. Loneliness has been shown to be as detrimental to our physical health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And it's not just a feeling. It's a state of being that fuels depression, anxiety, and paranoia. We were becoming a nation of lonely individuals, adrift without the social anchors that had steadied previous generations. Now, here is the crucial point where everything collides. Our mental health system, the one we were finally becoming aware of, was built on an individualistic model. It saw depression and anxiety as problems located entirely inside a person's head, a chemical imbalance, a cognitive distortion, past trauma. And while all of those things can be true and are vitally important, this model had a massive blind spot. It had no language, no framework for understanding how these colossal societal forces, economic anxiety, digital isolation, and the collapse of community, were directly contributing to the epidemic of distress. It saw the person treading water and diagnosed them with a swimming disorder. It saw the person starving for connection and diagnosed them with a social anxiety disorder. It saw the person buckling under the weight of impossible debt and diagnosed them with a generalized anxiety disorder. We began, with the best of intentions, to pathologize normal human reactions to an increasingly abnormal and stressful environment. We were taking systemic problems and framing them as individual pathologies. The problem wasn't that the game was rigged. The problem was that you weren't resilient enough. The problem wasn't that society was sick. The problem was that you were. This was a catastrophic misdiagnosis, and it had profound consequences. It meant that the solutions we offered were often woefully inadequate. A prescription for an antidepressant doesn't pay your student loans. A mindfulness app doesn't rebuild a community center. A weekly therapy session doesn't change the algorithm that's feeding you content designed to make you angry and afraid. The burgeoning mental health awareness movement, therefore, found itself promoting a deeply flawed product. It was selling a map of the individual mind, while the real monsters were lurking on the map of the world itself. It encouraged people to work on themselves, to focus inward, to practice self-care, to fix their own broken brains. But it largely failed to ask the bigger, more difficult question: what if our brains aren't broken? What if they're just responding perfectly and painfully to a world that is? This fundamental disconnect, this failure to see the forest for the trees, set the stage for the next, and perhaps most bizarre, chapter in the story of mental health awareness: its collision with corporate culture and the free market. And so, the free market did what the free market does best. It found a new product to sell. And that product was your sanity. This wasn't a hostile takeover. It was a seduction. A quiet, gradual absorption of a deeply human struggle into the gears of commerce. It began with a simple, powerful realization within the boardrooms of corporate America. A stressed, anxious, and depressed workforce is an unproductive workforce. Burnout wasn't just a personal tragedy. It was a drag on the bottom line. For decades, the solution was simple: demand more, push harder, replace the ones who break. But as awareness grew, that strategy started to look, well, barbaric and bad for public relations. They needed a new tool, a new language. And in the burgeoning mental health awareness movement, they found the perfect one. They didn't need to change the crushing deadlines, the stagnant wages, or the culture of constant availability. No, they just needed to help the employee change their response to it. The problem wasn't the toxic environment. The problem was your lack of resilience. The responsibility wasn't on the system to become less damaging. The responsibility was on you to become more durable. This shift was a work of corporate genius. It was the moment mental health stopped being just a state of being and started being a key performance indicator. The first wave of this was deceptively positive. Companies started offering wellness programs. They brought in yoga instructors for lunchtime sessions and offered workshops on managing stress. On the surface, who could argue with that? Free yoga sounds great, but look closer. It's a 1-hour class designed to counteract a 50-hour week of high-pressure work. It's a mathematical absurdity. It's like trying to fix a shattered dam with a single piece of duct tape. It's a gesture that performs the appearance of caring, while changing none of the fundamental conditions that necessitate the care in the first place. Then came the apps. The explosion of mindfulness and meditation apps was a godsend for this new corporate wellness model. Here was a scalable, trackable, low-cost solution that could be deployed to thousands of employees with a single email. Feeling overwhelmed by your workload? Don't worry, we've purchased a corporate subscription to Camife. Just take 10 minutes to meditate at your desk. The irony is staggering. The very device, your phone, that tethers you to the office 24/7, that delivers the late-night emails and the weekend Slack notifications, was now being presented as your salvation. These apps gamified peace of mind. They turned self-care into a checklist. Did you do your 10-minute breathing exercise today? You get a digital badge. You get a streak. It subtly transformed the act of mental restoration into another task to be completed, another metric to be met. It became a way to optimize your downtime so you could be a more efficient cog in the machine when you were back on the clock. The goal wasn't for you to be genuinely well. The goal was for you to be well enough to work. The language itself was co-opted. Words with deep, therapeutic meaning were hollowed out and turned into corporate buzzwords. Resilience no longer meant the profound human capacity to endure and find meaning in suffering. It meant the ability to absorb more stress without complaining. Mindfulness wasn't about a non-judgmental awareness of the present moment. It became a productivity hack to improve focus on the next spreadsheet. And self-care, that radical act of self-preservation, was rebranded. It wasn't about setting boundaries, saying no, or demanding better conditions. It was about buying a bath bomb, ordering takeout, and binging a show, all so you could be sufficiently recharged to face the same depleting environment on Monday morning. It became a consumer activity, another product to buy. This created a deeply insidious feedback loop. The more the corporate world stressed us out, the more it could sell us the cures for that stress. It's like an arsonist opening a store that sells fire extinguishers. They create the problem and then profit from the solution, all while positioning themselves as the hero of the story. Look how much we care about your well-being, the company says, as it hands you a branded stress ball in one hand and another urgent project with an impossible deadline in the other. This is the phase where the mental health day entered the lexicon. And again, on the surface, it seems like a victory. But what did it really become? For many, it's just a rebranded sick day, cloaked in a new, more acceptable language. You still have to get permission to take it. You still come back to the same pile of work, often larger than when you left. And it perpetuates the core fallacy that mental health is something to be dealt with in isolated, pre-approved chunks of time, rather than something that is impacted by every minute of your work life. It treats the symptom, the overwhelming need to escape, while ignoring the disease, the environment you're desperate to escape from. The most damaging part of this corporate commodification is the way it fosters a profound cognitive dissonance in employees. Your manager, who just sent you an email at 10 p.m., now leads a team meeting about the importance of work-life balance. The company's all-hands meeting features a slickly produced video about mental health resources, right before they announce a new round of layoffs due to restructuring. You are told to be vulnerable and bring your whole self to work, but you know instinctively that revealing a genuine struggle with anxiety or depression could sideline you for the next big promotion. So you perform wellness. You talk about the great meditation you did this morning. You mention you're taking a mental health day to recharge your batteries. You use the approved language. You project an image of someone who is successfully managing their well-being. Someone who is resilient, mindful, and optimized. It creates a culture where it's acceptable to talk about mental health, but only in a very specific, sanitized, and triumphant way. You can talk about the struggle as long as you've already overcome it. You can share your story as long as it has a neat, inspirational ending that makes the company look good for having supported you through it. This isn't awareness. It's brand management. It's risk mitigation. It's a performance. And it leaves millions of people feeling more isolated than ever. They are sitting in their cubicles or on Zoom calls, listening to the corporate-approved wellness chatter, all while their own messy, complicated, and unspoken mental health struggles are screaming beneath the surface. They are being handed a smoothie and a yoga mat when what they really need is a manageable workload, a living wage, and the right to truly disconnect. They are being sold the idea that their well-being is a personal responsibility, a commodity they can purchase or a skill they can learn, deflecting from the much more difficult and expensive truth that genuine mental health often requires systemic institutional change. This commercialization didn't just stay in the office. It spilled out, seeping into every corner of our culture. Because once you turn well-being into a product, you create a market. And a market needs influencers, brands, and aspirational content. The corporate world built the factory for producing sanitized, marketable mental health, but it was social media that would build the global showroom. It would take this idea of performed wellness and amplify it, filter it, and turn it into the next great cultural battleground, blurring the lines between genuine vulnerability and personal branding in ways no one could have ever predicted. And so the digital age arrived not as a gentle wave but as a tsunami. Suddenly, the conversation wasn't happening in quiet doctors' offices or university lecture halls. It was happening in the palm of your hand, in a brightly lit, infinitely scrolling feed. The first wave was euphoric. Information that was once locked behind paywalls or academic jargon was now being democratized. Colorful, easy-to-digest infographics explaining the difference between a panic attack and an anxiety attack went viral. Therapists, once inaccessible figures, became content creators on TikTok, offering 60-second tips on managing intrusive thoughts or setting healthy boundaries. For millions, this was a revelation. It was a lifeline. People found communities in comment sections, realizing for the first time that the strange, isolating thoughts they had were not unique to them. The phrase "I thought I was the only one" became a digital chorus, a powerful testament to the platform's ability to connect and to validate. Stigma, that old monolithic monster, began to crumble under the sheer weight of shared experience. It was no longer shameful to admit you were struggling. In fact, it was relatable. It was content. But every digital utopia has its shadow. As the language of therapy seeped into the mainstream, it began to change. Words that were once precise clinical tools became blunt instruments in everyday life. Gaslighting, a term for a specific and insidious form of psychological abuse, was suddenly used to describe any disagreement. A friend who forgot to text back wasn't just forgetful. They were violating your boundaries. A difficult ex-partner wasn't just a bad match. They were a toxic narcissist. This wasn't just a misunderstanding of terms. It was a fundamental shift in how we related to one another. The therapeutic framework, designed to help individuals understand their own inner worlds, was being externalized and weaponized. It created a new unassailable high ground in arguments. You could shut down any conflict by declaring your trauma was being triggered, or that your emotional labor was being exploited. It became a way to pathologize the normal, messy, and often difficult friction of human relationships, replacing empathy and compromise with diagnosis and accusation. The very language meant to foster understanding was now building walls. This new dialect of therapy speak dovetailed perfectly with the central currency of the social media age, the personal narrative. The idea of vulnerability, once a private and sacred act of sharing, was transformed into a public performance. Your pain became your brand. Your trauma became your story arc. And the most compelling story wins the most engagement. A new unspoken pressure emerged. The pressure to have a neatly packaged trauma narrative. To be authentic online, you had to have a story of suffering, overcoming, and healing. Preferably one that could be told through a series of aesthetically pleasing posts with long, heartfelt captions. The line between sharing to connect and sharing for clicks became impossibly thin. Did that influencer post a tearful selfie because they wanted to destigmatize depression? Or because they knew that raw, unfiltered emotion generates likes and boosts their visibility for the next brand deal? The algorithm doesn't know the difference. It only knows what keeps our eyes on the screen. And it turns out, curated, well-lit suffering is incredibly engaging. We were watching the birth of the trauma economy, where personal history is monetized and the most vulnerable parts of ourselves are put on display for public consumption and judgment. And where there is an economy, corporations will follow. The wellness industry, once a niche market of yoga mats and green juice, exploded into a multi-trillion-dollar behemoth. Mental health awareness wasn't just a social good. It was a marketing strategy. Suddenly, every brand wanted to be part of the conversation. Fast fashion companies sold t-shirts with slogans like, "Anxiety is a liar." Banking apps sent push notifications reminding you to take a moment for mindfulness during Mental Health Awareness Month. The very corporations contributing to a culture of burnout, stress, and financial anxiety were now positioning themselves as the purveyors of the cure. Self-care, a radical concept originally about preserving oneself against systemic pressures, was reduced to a consumer activity. Feeling overwhelmed? Don't demand better working conditions. Buy this lavender-scented bath bomb. Feeling depressed? Don't seek systemic change. Buy this weighted blanket or download this meditation app for a monthly subscription. The message was clear. Your well-being is your own personal responsibility, and it can be purchased. The movement for mental health was being hollowed out from the inside. Its revolutionary potential co-opted and sold back to us as a lifestyle accessory. Inevitably, a fatigue began to set in. A backlash started brewing, not against the idea of mental health itself, but against the culture that had grown up around it. People started to question if we had gone too far. Were we over-pathologizing the human experience? Was every moment of sadness a depressive episode? Was every bit of worry a symptom of an anxiety disorder? By giving a clinical label to every uncomfortable emotion, were we inadvertently making ourselves less resilient? The pendulum, having swung so far in the direction of awareness and diagnosis, was beginning to swing back. Skepticism grew towards the endless parade of online self-diagnosis and the influencers who seemed to collect mental illnesses like trading cards. The conversation became a minefield. To question the new orthodoxy was to risk being labeled as insensitive or stigmatizing. But to accept it wholesale was to ignore the creeping sense that something was deeply wrong. We had successfully made it okay to talk about mental health, but in doing so, we had also made it fashionable, profitable, and deeply, deeply complicated. We had created a culture that was simultaneously more aware of mental illness than ever before, and perhaps more confused about what it actually meant to be mentally well. The very movement designed to bring clarity had, for many, only created a thicker fog. This fog descended in countless subtle ways. It crept into our social media feeds, our advertisements, our casual conversations. Suddenly, the complex, nuanced language of psychology was being flattened into shareable infographics and 30-second videos. The algorithm, in its infinite and dispassionate wisdom, discovered that mental health content was engaging, and so it fed us more. We were flooded with 5 signs you have high-functioning anxiety. Are you an empath? Or the ADHD trait no one talks about. For someone scrolling late at night, feeling lost or just a little off, these posts felt like a revelation. They offered a name, a label, for a feeling they couldn't articulate. Felt like understanding, but this was a dangerous new frontier. The self-diagnosis boom was on. A person who was simply disorganized might now believe they had ADHD. Someone experiencing normal grief might conclude they had clinical depression. The complex process of differential diagnosis, something a trained professional spends years learning, was being replaced by a checklist on a pastel-colored Instagram post. The intention was to validate feelings, but the result was often to pathologize the human experience. Every quirk, every struggle, every bad day was now a potential symptom to be cataloged. We had 1,000 new labels for our pain, but very little guidance on what to do with them. This digital wave was quickly followed by a commercial one. The market saw an opportunity, and the concept of self-care was co-opted and commodified. What began as a radical idea from activist and feminist circles, the idea that caring for oneself was a necessary act of political warfare for marginalized communities, was stripped of its context and sold back to us in the form of scented candles, weighted blankets, and CBD-infused everything. Mental wellness was no longer just a state of being. It was an aesthetic. It was a lifestyle brand. If you weren't journaling in a leather-bound notebook, drinking mushroom coffee, and taking an aesthetically pleasing bath, were you even trying to be well? This created a new, insidious form of pressure, the pressure to perform wellness. It implied that mental health could be purchased, that if you just bought the right products you could consume your way to a peaceful mind. For those who couldn't afford this new wellness economy, it added a layer of guilt and inadequacy. Their inability to participate in these rituals was framed as a personal failure, rather than a systemic issue of access and affordability. Perhaps the most damaging part of this fog was the dilution of language. Words that once held immense clinical weight became conversational fluff. Trauma, a term meant to describe a deeply distressing or disturbing experience that overwhelms an individual's ability to cope, was now used to describe watching a cringy TV show or having a bad date. I'm so triggered. A phrase rooted in the very real experience of post-traumatic stress disorder, where a stimulus can cause a flashback to a traumatic event, became a common way to say, I'm mildly annoyed. A person who liked a tidy desk would say, I'm so OCD, completely erasing the agonizing, intrusive, and debilitating reality of obsessive-compulsive disorder. This wasn't just a matter of semantics. This linguistic drift had profound consequences. For the person suffering from genuine, diagnosed PTSD, hearing the word trauma used so casually was invalidating. It minimized their life-altering pain. For the individual battling the relentless, irrational cycles of OCD, hearing it equated with a preference for neatness was a slap in the face. It made it harder for them to be taken seriously. When these critical terms lose their meaning, they lose their power. They become buzzwords, stripped of their diagnostic and descriptive precision. It makes it infinitely harder for people with severe conditions to explain their reality, when the very words they need to do so have been rendered almost meaningless by popular culture. The conversation became louder, yes, but it was also becoming less coherent. Inevitably, this oversaturation led to a backlash. A deep-seated skepticism began to brew. As everyone started talking about their anxiety and their trauma, a cynical counter-narrative emerged. People started to wonder, is everyone really traumatized? Is this just a new way to get attention? The term mental health started to be used by some as a pejorative, an excuse for avoiding responsibility or being soft. This was the cruelest irony. The movement designed to fight stigma had inadvertently created a new one. The stigma of being perceived as faking it, of jumping on a bandwagon, of using a mental health label as a shield. Now, a person genuinely struggling had to contend not only with their internal battle, but with the external suspicion that their suffering might not be real. They might hesitate to speak up for fear of being accused of being a snowflake, or of simply wanting sympathy. This environment also gave rise to the performance of vulnerability. On social media, sharing your struggles became a form of currency. It garnered likes, comments, and a sense of community. But it was often a curated, aestheticized vulnerability. The crying selfie with a perfectly crafted caption, the eloquent post about hitting rock bottom that still managed to look beautiful. This wasn't always a conscious, malicious act. It was often a genuine attempt to connect. But it set a bizarre, unrealistic standard for what suffering should look like. It had to be articulate, photogenic, and ultimately inspiring. It created a pressure to package one's pain for public consumption. This left no room for the messy, ugly, inarticulate reality of a true mental health crisis. The kind of breakdown that doesn't look good on camera. The depression that robs you of the ability to form a coherent sentence, let alone write a poetic Instagram post. The performance of healing became more visible than the reality of the struggle. We found ourselves adrift in a sea of contradictions. We were told to talk about our mental health, but not too much, lest we be seen as attention-seeking. We were told to be vulnerable, but it had to be the right kind of vulnerability. We were told to practice self-care, but primarily through consumption. We were given a vast new vocabulary to describe our inner lives, but the words were becoming increasingly hollow. The silence had been shattered, but in its place was a cacophony of conflicting voices, of self-proclaimed gurus, of corporate wellness slogans, and of well-meaning but misguided advice. The central challenge was no longer simply about starting the conversation. The new, far more complex challenge was learning how to have the right conversation. It was about figuring out how to separate the signal from the noise, the evidence-based from the anecdotal, the genuine from the performative, and how to find a path back to authentic well-being in the middle of this dense, confusing, and ever-present fog. So how do we do it? How do we find that path? The first step is to trade passive consumption for active curiosity. It means we stop scrolling for answers and start developing a better filter for questions. When you see a piece of mental health advice online, whether it's from a therapist on TikTok or a wellness influencer on Instagram, you have to become your own quality control. Ask yourself, who is this person? What are their qualifications? Are they selling me a product? Or are they sharing an evidence-based principle? Are they speaking in universal truths? Or are they sharing what worked for their specific, unique life? This isn't about being cynical. It's about being discerning. It's about treating the information you feed your mind with the same care you would treat the food you feed your body. You wouldn't build your diet around a single unverified claim, and you shouldn't build your mental health strategy that way either. The real foundational knowledge isn't usually found in a 30-second video. It's in the work of organizations like the National Alliance on Mental Illness, or NAMI. It's in the research published by the National Institute of Mental Health. It's in the books and articles written by licensed clinicians and researchers who have dedicated their lives to understanding this stuff. It's less glamorous, it requires more effort, but it's the bedrock. The noise of social media is loud and chaotic, but the signal of genuine, helpful information is still there if you learn how to listen for it. It's the difference between a fleeting trend and a timeless principle. The second step is to shift the focus from the external to the internal. For too long, the conversation has been about labels. Am I an introvert? Do I have anxiety? Do I have ADHD? These labels can be incredibly useful. They can provide a framework, a sense of community, and a direction for treatment. But a diagnosis is a signpost, not a destination. It's a piece of information about you. It is not the entirety of you. True mental wellness is not about perfectly fitting into a diagnostic box. It's about understanding your own unique operating system. This is where the real work begins, the work that no influencer can do for you. It's the work of self-reflection. It's asking yourself, when do I feel most energized? When do I feel most drained? What thought patterns keep showing up and tripping me? What people in my life lift me up, and which ones pull me down? It's about noticing the subtle connection between the quality of your sleep and the stability of your mood. It's about recognizing that the anxiety you feel might be your body's way of telling you that a boundary has been crossed. This is a deeply personal, investigative process. It might involve journaling, meditation, or simply taking quiet walks without your phone. But more than anything, it almost always involves talking to someone who is trained to help you connect the dots. A therapist, a counselor, a psychologist. Therapy at its best isn't about getting answers from an expert. It's about having a skilled guide who can help you find the answers that are already inside of you. They hold up a mirror so you can finally see yourself clearly, not just the parts you like, but the whole complex, messy, and beautiful picture. You are the world's leading expert on yourself. The journey of mental health is about claiming that expertise. And this leads to the third and most crucial step, turning awareness into action. Because awareness without action is just trivia. Knowing you have anxiety doesn't fix it. Understanding the roots of your depression doesn't automatically lift it. The entire point of this global mental health awareness movement is not to create a world where everyone can expertly name their own suffering. It's to create a world where everyone feels empowered to do something about it. Action doesn't have to be monumental. The wellness industry tries to sell us on expensive retreats, complicated morning routines, and a whole arsenal of products. But meaningful action is usually far simpler and far more accessible. Action is putting on your shoes and walking around the block when your mind is screaming at you to stay inside. Action is drinking a glass of water when you feel overwhelmed. Action is texting a friend, "I'm having a rough day," instead of pretending everything is fine. Action is choosing to go to bed instead of scrolling for another hour. These are not small things. In the face of profound mental and emotional struggle, these simple, deliberate choices are acts of rebellion. They are declarations that you are worth the effort. Each one is a vote you cast for your own well-being. Over time, these small actions build on each other. They create momentum. The walk around the block becomes a daily habit. The vulnerable text message deepens a friendship. The extra hour of sleep gives you the clarity to face the next day. This is how change actually happens. Not in one grand sweeping gesture, but in 1,000 tiny courageous steps. And sometimes action is bigger. It's making the phone call you've been dreading to schedule your first therapy appointment. It's having a difficult conversation with a loved one about how their behavior affects you. It's setting a firm boundary at work. These actions are terrifying. They require a level of courage that we rarely give ourselves credit for. We have been taught to see this as weakness, as failure, as an admission that we can't handle it on our own. But we need to rewrite that story. The definition of strength is not the absence of struggle. Strength is looking your struggle in the eye and saying, "I see you, and I am going to get the help I need to face you." Strength is vulnerability. Strength is asking for help. It is the single most powerful action you can take. It is the moment the weight on your shoulders finally begins to be shared. So why does mental health awareness matter? It matters because for centuries, people suffered in silence, believing they were broken, isolated, and alone in their pain. It matters because that silence was deadly. It matters because it gives us the language to describe our inner worlds, to find kinship in shared experiences, and to replace shame with understanding. But its true purpose, the final evolution of this movement, is to build a bridge from awareness to access. It's to create a world where mental health care is treated like all other healthcare, essential, accessible, and affordable. It's to build workplaces where mental health days are as normal as sick days. It's to raise a generation of children who know how to manage their emotions as well as they know how to read and write. The ultimate goal of mental health awareness is to make itself obsolete. To arrive at a future where talking about our mental state is as normal as talking about the weather. A future where we don't need a special month to have these conversations. because they are woven into the fabric of our daily lives. We are not there yet, but every time one of us chooses to be honest about our struggles, every time we listen to a friend without judgment, every time we advocate for better policies, we lay another stone on that path. This journey is not about achieving a permanent state of happiness. It's about building a life that can hold the full spectrum of human emotion, the joy and the sorrow, the clarity and the confusion, the peace and the pain. It's about developing the resilience to navigate the storms, knowing that they will pass. It's about understanding that you are not broken, you are a human being having a human experience. So what is mental health awareness? It's the beginning of a conversation, a global permission slip to finally be honest. But it's what you do with that permission that truly matters. The work is not just to be aware of mental health. The work is to practice it, to live it, to build a life and a world that supports it. The most important conversation about mental health is the one you have with yourself. The second most important is the one you have with someone else. Start one of them today.